Returning from India after a high-stakes Quad meeting in New Delhi, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio made a sudden stop in Armenia. And the stakes were hard to ignore, because this was not a routine diplomatic visit in Yerevan. Rubio signed a major strategic partnership agreement with Armenia, covering critical minerals, transport connectivity, and a controversial new regional corridor project. Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, or TRIPP, a corridor that could now become one of the most dangerous geopolitical flashpoints in Eurasia, especially after the outbreak of the US-Iran war earlier this year. Because what Washington calls economic connectivity, Iran increasingly sees as strategic encirclement. At the center of Rubio's visit was a proposed transit route called TRIPP. The route would pass through southern Armenia, connecting mainland Azerbaijan to its exclave of Nakhchivan, and onward into Turkey. On paper, it is an infrastructure and trade corridor, but strategically, it could completely reshape the South Caucasus.
And so I was honored to join the foreign minister here today to initial this bilateral agreement on the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, or is known TRIPP. This agreement marks the biggest step to date on making this historic route a reality, on advancing peace and on increasing prosperity in Armenia and, frankly, on the region.
The agreement also includes cooperation on critical minerals, supply chains, and regional infrastructure. And for Washington, the corridor offers something extremely valuable: a new geopolitical foothold in one of the world's most sensitive crossroads. But almost immediately, alarm bells began ringing in Tehran. Iran's concern goes far beyond economics. Tehran fears the corridor could eventually reduce Iran's strategic access to Armenia and the wider Caucasus region. But even more importantly, Iran fears growing American influence directly near its northern border. And that fear has intensified dramatically since the US-Iran conflict erupted on February 28, 2026. Since then, America has struck inside Iran. Hormuz is at edge, and military escalation across the region have fundamentally changed Tehran's security calculations. Now imagine how this looks from Iran's perspective. US military pressure in the Gulf, US alliances expanding across West Asia, and now a US-backed strategic corridor emerging in the Caucasus. Iranian leaders increasingly fear a broader containment strategy. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian did not hide Tehran's concerns. During talks in Yerevan in August 2025, he warned that governance in the Caucasus must remain Caucasian. That statement carried a deeper message. Iran opposes any extra-regional military or strategic influence near its borders, especially American influence. Tehran also fears the corridor could eventually isolate Iran from key northern trade routes, while bringing potentially hostile forces closer to Iranian territory. Iran has already warned Armenia against allowing outside powers to dominate the project. And after months of war tensions with Washington, Iranian hardliners are treating the corridor as far more than just an economic route. Armenia now finds itself trapped between powerful competing forces. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has steadily shifted Armenia closer to the west after Russia failed to stop Azerbaijan's 2023 takeover of Nagorno-Karabakh. That moment shattered Armenian trust in Moscow's security umbrella. Since then, Armenia has deepened ties with the United States. Joint military drills, strategic agreements, Western partnerships, and now, the Corridor Project. But Yerevan also knows it cannot afford to alienate Iran completely. That is why Pashinyan moved quickly to reassure Tehran that any transit routes through Armenia would remain under Armenian control. Because Armenia understands the danger of becoming the frontline state in a much bigger geopolitical confrontation. Russia is also watching developments with growing concern. For decades, Moscow dominated security arrangements across the South Caucasus. But the Ukraine war weakened Russia's regional grip. Now, its traditional ally Armenia is moving closer to Washington. And many analysts believe the Kremlin sees the corridor as another sign of expanding Western influence in what Russia still considers its strategic backyard. The proposed route could reduce Moscow's influence over regional trade and transit networks, and that creates another layer of geopolitical friction. Because now, three major powers are looking at the same corridor through three completely different lenses. The US sees opportunity, Iran sees threat, Russia sees erosion of influence. As for Armenia's plans to join the European Union, this of course requires special consideration. We have discussed this with Prime Minister Pashinyan more than once. We will support whatever is beneficial to the Armenian people. It would be logical to ask the citizens of Armenia what their choice is. And accordingly, we would draw the appropriate conclusions and move towards a soft, civilized, and mutually beneficial separation. This is no longer just a regional infrastructure story. The battle over corridors has become central to global geopolitics. The South Caucasus sits directly at the intersection of Europe, which means whoever shapes these routes could shape the future balance of power across Eurasia itself. And that is why this project matters far beyond Armenia and Azerbaijan. For now, the corridor remains a diplomatic project. But in today's geopolitical climate, infrastructure can quickly become strategy. Because sometimes the next major flashpoint does not begin with tanks. It begins with a road.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to Mirror Now.